To our amazing viewers at Cheating Tales Lab, we'd love to hear which part of the world are you joining us from. Let us know. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. The Last Normal Day. Clifford Stevenson had learned to read silence the way other men read newspapers. 30 years in military special operations had taught him that what people didn't say often mattered more than what they did. That Thursday evening, when his daughter Maureen's car pulled into the driveway of his modest Seattle home at 4:47 p.m., 2 hours earlier than usual, the quality of silence that followed told him everything had changed. He was in the garage, elbows deep in the engine of his 1970 Dodge Charger, the project car that had kept him sane since retiring 3 years ago. The metallic click of her car door closing had a finality to it that made his shoulders tense. No second door, no cheerful greeting, just footsteps, hesitant and uneven, moving toward the house. Clifford wiped his hands on a shop rag, his 52-year-old frame still carrying the disciplined posture of soldier. His close-cropped, gray hair and weathered face bore the marks of 2 decades in force reconnaissance, followed by another decade in roles he still couldn't discuss. The operations in Kandahar, the extractions in Somalia, the missions that didn't exist on paper. They'd left scars, but they'd also honed instincts that never dulled. He found Maureen in the kitchen, standing motionless at the sink, staring out the window at nothing. Her designer blazer, navy blue, the one she'd excitedly shown him last month, was torn at the shoulder. Her laptop bag lay abandoned by the door, its contents spilling onto the hardwood floor. But it was her hands that made his blood run cold. They were trembling, gripping the edge of the counter so hard her knuckles had gone white. Pumpkin, the old nickname, came out softly, carefully, the way you'd approach a spooked animal. She didn't turn around, didn't acknowledge him, just kept staring out that window, her breath coming in short, controlled bursts that reminded him uncomfortably of soldiers he'd seen fighting off panic attacks. Clifford had raised Maureen alone since she was 8, after her mother, Gloria, died in a car accident. It had been just the two of them through her middle school years, high school, college. She'd graduated top of her class from Stanford with a computer science degree, turned down offers from Google and Microsoft to join a promising startup called NeuralSync. "I want to build something new, Dad," she'd told him 6 months ago, her eyes bright with ambition. Not just maintain someone else's legacy. He'd been proud, maybe too proud, proud enough to ignore the warning signs. Maureen. He moved closer, but didn't touch her. What happened? She finally turned, and what he saw on her 26-year-old daughter's face transported him back to Helmand Province, to the eyes of villagers who'd survived Taliban occupation. That same hollow shock, that same violation. "I was fired," she said, her voice distant and mechanical. "Dennis called me into his office at 2 p.m. Said my performance wasn't meeting expectations. Said I was terminated effective immediately. Security escorted me out." Dennis Hoover, the CEO. Clifford had met him once, briefly, at a company holiday party Maureen had insisted he attend. A man in his early 40s with expensive teeth, a handshake that lasted a second too long, and eyes that lingered on his daughter in ways that made Clifford's jaw tighten. He'd mentioned it to Maureen afterward, carefully, knowing she'd bristle at any suggestion she couldn't handle herself. "He's just enthusiastic, Dad," she'd said, laughing it off. "That's how people are in tech. Everything's intensity and passion." Now, looking at her torn blazer, Clifford knew his instincts had been right. "That's not all," he said. Not question. Maureen's composure cracked. Her chin trembled. "In the parking garage, I was putting my box in the car. He came up behind me. Said," she stopped, swallowed hard. "Said that maybe if I'd been friendlier during my employment, things could have ended differently. That it wasn't too late to change his mind." Clifford's hands balled into fists, but he kept his voice level. "Did he touch you?" He grabbed my arm, pushed me against my car, put his hand on my. She couldn't finish. Tears finally came, silent and devastating. "I need him." Got away. Drove straight here. He moved then, pulling her into an embrace while his mind shifted into tactical mode. Threat assessment, evidence collection, response protocols. But underneath that professional detachment, something older and more primal was stirring. something he'd spent 3 years in retirement trying to bury. "We call the police," Clifford said, already reaching for his phone. "I can't." Maureen pulled back, wiping her eyes. "Dennis made me sign an NDA when I was hired. It was in my employment contract. Anything that happens with the company, any disputes, I agreed to mandatory arbitration and confidentiality." His head of security, this guy Ricardo Whitehead, he reminded me when they walked me out, said if I talked to anyone, Dennis would sue me for everything I have. An NDA doesn't cover assault. Dad, you don't understand how this works. Dennis Hoover isn't just some CEO. His company is worth $4 billion. He has lawyers on retainer who do nothing but make problems disappear. He's connected to Senator Clay Carey, to the tech elite in Silicon Valley. Who's going to believe me over him? Clifford looked at his daughter, brilliant, accomplished, reduced to this trembling victim, and felt the last restraints of civilized society begin to snap. "Pack a bag," he said quietly. "You're staying here for a while." That night, after Maureen finally fell asleep in her old bedroom, Clifford sat in his garage office and did what he did best: reconnaissance. His civilian laptop connected to a VPN purchased through cryptocurrency, then to a series of encrypted networks he'd learned to navigate during his later military years. Dennis Hoover, born in Connecticut, MBA from Wharton, previous executive positions at 3 Silicon Valley companies before founding NeuralSync 4 years ago. The company developed AI-driven neural interface technology, whatever that meant. $200 million in venture capital funding. Headquarters in downtown Seattle, penthouse residence in the Emerald Tower, $80 million property that had made the news. But Clifford didn't care about the public information. He dug deeper into the forums and message boards where former employees congregated. It took 2 hours to find the patterns. NeuralSync had a turnover rate of 67% among female employees in the first year. 3 previous assistants to Dennis Hoover had all left within months, each signing enhanced severance agreements. On a Glassdoor review that had since been deleted but remained in cached searches, a former employee named Tricia Torres had written, "Brilliant technology, toxic culture. CEO creates hostile environment for women. HR exists to protect company, not employees." The review had been posted 14 months ago. Clifford found Tricia's LinkedIn profile. She now worked for a competitor in San Francisco. He filed that information away. More searching revealed that Dennis Hoover sat on the board of 2 charities and regularly posted about workplace equality on his social media. The performative hypocrisy made Clifford's lip curl. At 2 a.m., his burner phone buzzed. An unknown number. "Mr. Stevenson?" A smooth voice, professionally modulated. "My name is Felix O'Connor. I'm General Counsel for NeuralSync Technologies. I understand there may have been an unfortunate misunderstanding today involving your daughter, Maureen." Clifford said nothing. Let the lawyer fill the silence. "Your daughter signed a comprehensive non-disclosure agreement as part of her employment," Felix continued, each word carefully chosen. "This agreement covers all aspects of her employment and termination. Any violation would result in significant legal consequences. I'm calling as a courtesy to ensure everyone understands the situation clearly." Still, Clifford remained silent. A technique he'd used in interrogations: let them talk, let them reveal more than they intended. "Mr. Hoover is a respected businessman with a sterling reputation," Felix went on, and now there was an edge creeping into his voice. "Any false allegations would be met with immediate legal action. We have security footage from the parking garage that shows your daughter became aggressive and erratic when informed of her termination. Mr. Hoover was attempting to calm her down when she assaulted him. He's being generous by not pressing charges, but that generosity has limits." The lawyer's narrative was already being constructed, polished, weaponized. They'd done this before. "Your daughter signed an NDA," Felix said, his confidence returning. "She'll stay quiet. I strongly suggest you do the same. Have a good evening, Mr. Stevenson." The line went dead. Clifford set down the phone and stared at the photo on his desk. Him and Maureen at her Stanford graduation, both grinning, her holding her diploma like a trophy. He'd promised Gloria before she died that he'd protect their daughter. He'd promised Maureen she could chase her dreams without fear. Dennis Hoover had broken something precious and assumed he could buy silence with threats and lawyers. He'd made a mistake. Chapter 2. The Man in the Mirror. Clifford spent Friday collecting information. He called in favors from his old unit, men who transitioned into private security and had access to databases civilians couldn't reach. By noon, he had Dennis Hoover's complete financial records, not the sanitized version available to journalists, but the real accounting. The offshore accounts, the shell corporations, the paper trail of wealth built on other people's innovations. But Clifford wasn't interested in embezzlement or financial crimes. He was building a psychological profile. Dennis Hoover had been born Dennis Hoffman in Hartford, Connecticut, to a middle-class family. His father, Calvin Hoffman, was a regional sales manager who drank too much and lost his job when Dennis was 15. His mother, Carol Hoffman, worked as a secretary to keep the family afloat. Dennis changed his surname to his mother's maiden name, Hoover, when he went to college, distancing himself from his father's failure. At Wharton, Dennis had been accused of sexual harassment by a classmate, Diane Willard, but the complaint was quietly settled. No formal disciplinary action. At his first startup, he'd been forced out after allegations of creating a hostile work environment, but he walked away with enough stock options to be set for life. The pattern repeated at his second company, then his third. Each time, enhanced NDAs, enhanced settlements, silence purchased with money and intimidation. But Dennis had learned from each near miss. By the time he founded Neural Sync, he'd surrounded himself with protection. Ricardo Whitehead, his head of security, was a former cop fired from the Seattle PD for excessive force complaints. The company's board was stacked with his fraternity brothers and investors who cared only about returns. Felix O'Connor, the lawyer, specialized in employment disputes and had a reputation for aggressive litigation tactics that buried victims under legal bills. Dennis Hoover was a predator who'd evolved, who'd built an ecosystem that enabled and protected him. Clifford also learned about the penthouse. The Emerald Tower, 38th floor, 8,000 square feet of luxury overlooking Elliott Bay. Security in the lobby, private elevator with biometric access, reinforced doors. Ricardo Whitehead had hired a 3-man security detail that rotated 12-hour shifts. To anyone else, it would seem impenetrable. To Clifford Stevenson, it was just another target. That afternoon, Maureen emerged from her room for the first time since yesterday. She'd showered and changed, but still moved like someone recovering from physical trauma. They sat at the kitchen table, and she told him everything. The months of uncomfortable comments from Dennis, the way he'd find excuses to touch her shoulder during meetings, how he'd started texting her late at night about work emergencies that never quite materialized. I thought if I just focused on the work, if I proved myself, he'd back off, she said, staring in her coffee. Other women in the company warned me. Trisha, before she left, she pulled me aside and said to document everything, to never be alone with him. But I thought I could handle it. I thought I was strong enough. You are strong, Clifford said firmly. This isn't about strength. This is about a man who abuses power. Dad, what are we going to do? Even if we go to the police, even if they believe me, it'll be his lawyers against. What? My word. He'll drag it out for years. He'll destroy my reputation in the industry. I'll never work in tech again. She wasn't wrong. Clifford had seen how these things played out. The system was designed to protect people like Dennis Hoover. But Clifford hadn't spent 3 decades in special operations because he trusted the system. Do you trust me? He asked. Maureen looked up, searching his face. Of course. Then I need you to trust me for the next few days. Stay here. Don't contact anyone from Neural Sync. Don't post on social media. Can you do that? She nodded slowly. What are you planning? It's better if you don't know yet. He reached across the table, took her hand. But I promise you this. Dennis Hoover is going to understand exactly what he's done, and he's going to face consequences. That evening, Clifford visited an old friend. Darren Butler lived in a nondescript house in Tacoma, 45 minutes south of Seattle. They'd served together in Force Recon, had pulled each other out of more bad situations than either cared to remember. After retiring, Darren had started a private security consulting firm that was, on paper, completely legitimate. Off paper, he provided specialized services to people who needed problems solved quietly. Cliff, Darren greeted him at the door, pulling him into a rough embrace. "Been too long, brother. Heard you were working on that charger." "Maureen needs help," Clifford said, cutting through the pleasantries. Darren's expression shifted immediately. "Come in." Over bourbon in Darren's study, Clifford laid out the situation. Everything. When he finished, Darren was quiet for a long moment. "I know Dennis Hoover," he finally said. "My firm bid on a security contract 2 years ago. Lost it to Ricardo Whitehead because we wouldn't agree to certain flexibilities in our scope of work. Hoover wanted security that would look the other way. We weren't interested." "Tell me about Whitehead." "Former Seattle PD. Worked narcotics before he got fired. 3 excessive force complaints, 2 settled out of court. Word is he was on the take from dealers, got caught, took the termination instead of prosecution. He's competent but dirty." "His team?" Darren pulled up files on his laptop. 3 guys. Former military, all dishonorably discharged or separated under cloudy circumstances. They're loyal to Whitehead, and he's loyal to whoever pays him. Can they be turned? Everyone can be turned. Question is, what are you planning? Clifford leaned forward. "I need to have a conversation with Dennis Hoover. A private conversation where he can't run to his lawyers or his security. Where it's just him and the truth." Darren raised an eyebrow. "That's a tall order. The man lives in a fortress. I've breached worse." "Cliff." Darren's tone turned serious. "I know what you're feeling. I'd feel the same if someone hurt my daughter. But there's revenge, and then there's throwing your life away. You go after a billionaire, you better be damn sure you can pull it off clean." "I didn't say anything about hurting him," Clifford said mildly. "Just talking." Darren studied him, then smiled grimly. "You're full of shit, but I'm in. What do you need?" They spent the next 2 hours planning. Darren provided intelligence on the security schedule, the building's systems, the weaknesses in Hoover's protection. The security detail changed shifts at 6 a.m. and 6 p.m. The morning shift was less alert. They'd been up all night and got complacent in those final hours. The penthouse had biometric security, but Darren knew a contractor who'd installed the system. For the right price, everything had back doors. "When?" Darren asked. "Tomorrow night. Early Sunday morning. You're not giving yourself much time." "I don't need much time," Clifford said. "I've had 30 years of training for this." Chapter 3. Penetration. Saturday night bled into Sunday morning. At 3 a.m., Clifford sat in a rental car 3 blocks from the Emerald Tower, dressed in black tactical clothing he'd modified to look like athletic wear, the kind of outfit a resident might wear coming back from a late-night gym session. His gray hair was hidden under a dark beanie. He carried a gym bag that contained equipment that would get him arrested if discovered. He'd left a note for Maureen on the kitchen table. "Trust me. Stay home. We'll explain everything soon." Darren's contractor, a man named Floyd Newell, had done his job. The biometric scanner in the service elevator had been reprogrammed to accept a backup code, 6 digits that would open the door to the penthouse utility entrance. The security cameras on the 38th floor would loop their footage for a 4-hour window. At 3:47 a.m., Clifford entered the Emerald Tower through the service entrance on the east side of the building, where deliveries arrived. He moved with purpose, like he belonged, and the weakened security guard barely glanced up from his phone. The service elevator took him to the 38th floor. The hallway was silent, plushly carpeted, the kind of space where every surface whispered wealth. Dennis Hoover's penthouse took up the entire floor, 2 units combined into one sprawling residence. Clifford punched in the code Floyd had provided. The utility door clicked open. He was inside. The security detail worked in shifts of 3, but at this hour, only 1 man was on active patrol. The other 2 would be in the security room near the main entrance, watching cameras and monitoring alerts. Clifford had studied the floor plan. The security room was 40 feet from his entry point, separated by the kitchen and service areas. He moved through the utility space, laundry room, staff quarters, storage, until he reached the kitchen. Commercial-grade appliances gleamed in the dimmed lighting. Beyond was the great room, and beyond that, the master suite where Dennis Hoover slept. Clifford checked his watch. 4:02 a.m. The roving guard should be checking the west wing balconies right now. He moved through the kitchen, past a dining room table that could seat 20, into a hallway lined with modern art that probably cost more than most people's houses. The master suite was at the far end, double doors that weren't locked. Why would they be, with security in the building? Dennis Hoover slept in a California king bed, alone, wearing silk pajamas. The room smelled of expensive cologne and entitlement. Floor-to-ceiling windows showed the Seattle skyline. The Space Needle lit up in the distance. Clifford stood at the foot of the bed for 10 seconds, just watching the man breathe, thinking about Maureen's torn blazer, her trembling hands, the violation in her eyes. Then he moved to the security room. The two guards were exactly where Darren predicted, one watching screens, one scrolling through his phone. Neither heard Clifford approach from behind. Neither had time to react before he'd applied pressure to their carotid arteries, cutting off blood flow to their brains. They dropped, unconscious but unharmed, into the chairs. Clifford zip-tied their hands and feet, gagged them with professional efficiency. He'd done this dozens of times in operations across 3 continents. These men were amateurs compared to the enemies he'd faced. The roving guard returned 7 minutes later and walked into the same trap. With the security neutralized, Clifford returned to the bedroom. He pulled out a syringe from his gym bag, a sedative he'd acquired through channels he wouldn't explain to anyone, including Darren. Not enough to cause permanent harm, just enough to keep Dennis Hoover manageable for the next hour. He injected it into Hoover's arm. The CEO stirred, mumbled something, then sank deeper into unconsciousness. Clifford worked quickly. He secured Hoover to the bed frame with restraints designed for exactly this purpose, each limb attached to a corner post, spread-eagled and vulnerable. Then he placed a chair at the foot of the bed and sat down to wait. Dawn crept through the windows, turning Seattle's skyline from black to gray to gold. Clifford watched the sun rise over the city his daughter called home, and he thought about all the times he'd waited like this. In Fallujah, in the mountains of Afghanistan, in places whose names he couldn't speak, waiting for targets to wake up, waiting for missions to begin. This was no different, just more personal. At 5:43 a.m., Dennis Hoover's eyes fluttered open. He stared at the ceiling for a moment, confused, then tried to move. The restraints caught him, and his confusion turned to panic. "Good morning," Clifford said quietly from the shadows. Hoover's head whipped toward the voice. His eyes widened as he processed the situation. The stranger in his bedroom, the restraints, his security nowhere to be found. "Who the fuck are you?" Hoover's voice was raw with fear, trying to sound like authority. "Do you know who I am? Do you have any idea what you just done?" "I know exactly who you are, Dennis." Clifford leaned forward into the light. "The question is, do you know who I am?" Hoover squinted, then recognition flickered. "You're Maureen's father, from the Christmas party. Good memory. I'm Clifford Stevenson, and yesterday, your lawyer called me, Felix O'Connor. He told me my daughter signed an NDA, that she'll stay quiet about what you did to her." Hoover's face cycled through expressions: fear, calculation, defiance. He settled on indignation. "Your daughter assaulted me. I have security footage that proves she became violent when terminated for poor performance. If anyone's the victim here..." Clifford was across the room before Hoover could finish the sentence. His hand clamped around the CEO's throat, not squeezing hard enough to cut off air, just enough to promise he could. "Let me explain something to you, Dennis," Clifford said, his voice perfectly calm. "I spent 30 years in military special operations. I've interrogated terrorists, toppled regimes, and eliminated targets in 16 countries. I speak 4 languages and can kill a man in over 20 different ways with my bare hands. Do you understand what that means?" Hoover's eyes were wide with terror now, all pretense of authority gone. "It means I know exactly how to make someone talk, how to find the truth, how to apply the right pressure to break through lies." Clifford released his throat. "It also means I know when someone is lying. And you, Dennis, are a liar." He returned to his chair, letting the words sink in. "Your security team is alive," Clifford continued. "They're unconscious and restrained, but unharmed. I haven't hurt you. Yet. This can stay civilized, or it can get very uncomfortable. That's entirely up to you. What do you want?" Hoover's voice cracked. "Money? I can pay you. Whatever you want." I don't want your money. I want you to understand something. Clifford pulled out his phone and began scrolling through photos. Over the past 24 hours, I've done research on you. Would you like to know what I found? He didn't wait for an answer. Diane Willard, Wharton Business School, 2009. Sexual harassment complaint, settled quietly. Andrea Bowers, TechCorp Solutions, 2015. Hostile work environment, enhanced severance agreement. Tricia Torres, Neural Sync, 2024. Constructive discharge, another NDA. And those are just the ones I found easily. How many others, Dennis? How many women have you hurt? How many lives have you damaged because you believed your wealth and position made you untouchable? Those were misunderstandings, Hoover stammered. Consensual situations that were misinterpreted. Shut up. Clifford's voice dropped to a whisper, which was somehow more terrifying than shouting. I'm not here to debate. I'm here to deliver a message. One you're going to remember for the rest of your life. He stood, walked to the window, looked out at the city. You hurt my daughter. You assaulted her, then used lawyers and NDAs to threaten her into silence. You thought your money and power made you safe. You were wrong. Clifford turned back to face him. This is lesson 1, Dennis. You don't touch my daughter. I'll have you arrested. Hoover tried one more time. Breaking and entering, kidnapping, assault. You'll spend the rest of your life in prison. Will I? Clifford smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. Your security team will wake up in a few hours with no memory of who attacked them. Side effect of the sedative I used. Your security cameras have been looping footage for the past 4 hours. There's no evidence I was ever here. And if you call the police, I'll make sure every woman you've ever harassed, every settlement you've ever paid, every NDA you've ever forced someone to sign becomes public knowledge. I'll destroy your reputation so thoroughly that your investors will abandon you. Your board will fire you, and your precious company will collapse. He leaned closer. But that's not the real reason you won't call the police, Dennis. You won't call because now you know the truth. You know that I can reach you anytime, anywhere. Your penthouse fortress? I'll walk through it like it wasn't even there. Your security? They couldn't stop me. Your lawyers? They can't protect you from someone who doesn't care about the law. Clifford straightened. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to release Maureen from her NDA. You're going to provide her with a settlement. $2 million, no admission of wrongdoing required. You're going to write a letter of recommendation so glowing that any company in tech will hire her. And you're never going to contact her, threaten her, or speak her name again. And if I don't, then I come back. And next time, Dennis, we won't just talk. Next time, I'll show you exactly what 30 years in special operations taught me about pain. Do you understand? Hoover nodded frantically, all pretense of dignity abandoned. Good. Clifford walked to the door, then paused. One more thing. You're going to think about hiring someone to retaliate against me. Don't. I have friends, resources, and skills you can't imagine. Come after me or my family, and I'll end you. Not metaphorically. I'll end your life, your company, everything you've built. And I'll sleep just fine afterward. He left Dennis Hoover chained to his bed, staring at the ceiling, finally understanding what it felt like to be powerless. Chapter 4. Cascading Failures. Clifford returned home as dawn fully broke over Seattle. He found Maureen awake in the kitchen, clutching a mug of coffee with both hands, her eyes rimmed with exhaustion and worry. Dad, where were you? She stood abruptly when he entered. I woke up and you were gone, and there was just that note. Sit down, pumpkin. He poured himself coffee, his hand steady despite the night's activities. I need to tell you what I've done. He explained everything. The research, the planning, the penetration of Hoover's penthouse. Maureen's expression cycled through shock, horror, anger, and something that might have been reluctant admiration. You chained him to his bed? Dad, that's kidnapping. Assault. You could go to prison. I could, Clifford agreed. But I won't, because Dennis Hoover isn't going to report this. He's going to do exactly what I told him to do. You can't know that. What if he calls the police right now? Then we deal with it. But he won't. Men like Dennis, they're bullies. They only understand power. I showed him he has none. Not against me. Maureen sank back in her chair, processing. I don't know how to feel about this. Part of me is grateful, relieved. But Dad, you could have been hurt. or arrested. Or, I wasn't. He reached across the table, squeezed her hand. And I won't be. Trust me. But even as he said it, Clifford knew the situation was more complicated than he'd let on. During his research, he'd uncovered something troubling. Something he hadn't mentioned to Maureen because he wasn't yet sure what to do with it. Dennis Hoover wasn't just a serial harasser. He was connected to something darker. While digging through NeuralSync's corporate structure, Clifford had found an irregular pattern of consultants. Always women, always hired for 3 to 6 month contracts, always paid through shell companies. 5 in the past 2 years. When he tracked down their names and tried to contact them, 3 didn't respond. 1 had deleted all her social media. The 5th, a woman named Violet Blair, had her last known address listed as a psychiatric facility in Oregon. The pattern suggested something worse than harassment. It suggested systematic abuse, possibly trafficking or blackmail. Clifford had spent enough time in dark corners of the world to recognize predator infrastructure when he saw it. He'd gone to Hoover's penthouse to deliver a message to protect his daughter, but now he was wondering if he should have done more, if walking away had been the right call. These thoughts were interrupted by his phone buzzing. Unknown number. Mr. Stevenson. Felix O'Connor's voice, but without yesterday's confidence. We need to talk. I'm listening. My client has agreed to release your daughter from her non-disclosure agreement. He's also prepared to offer a settlement of $2 million and provide a letter of recommendation. In exchange, we need assurance that no further incidents will occur. Clifford had expected this call, but not so soon. Hoover must have contacted his lawyer the moment Clifford left. Have Felix prepare the documents. I'll review them with my own attorney. Your own attorney? Felix sounded surprised. Mr. Stevenson, I don't think you understand. I understand perfectly, Mr. O'Connor. Your client assaulted my daughter, and now he's trying to buy silence. I'm agreeing to his terms, but I'm not stupid enough to sign documents without legal review. Have them ready by Monday. He hung up before the lawyer could respond. Maureen was staring at him. He agreed? Just like that. Fear is a powerful motivator. But privately, Clifford was troubled. It had been too easy. Men like Dennis Hoover didn't surrender without a fight. Which meant this wasn't surrender. It was a tactical retreat. Hoover was buying time, regrouping, planning his countermove. Monday morning arrived with an email containing the settlement documents. Clifford had Maureen forward them to a lawyer he trusted, Tom Winter, a former JAG officer who transitioned to civilian practice. Tom reviewed everything with a meticulous eye and declared the documents clean. Your daughter gets $2 million, the NDA is voided, and Hoover agrees not to disparage her professionally. Tom explained over the phone. This is unusually favorable. What kind of leverage do you have on this guy? The kind we don't discuss, Clifford replied. By Wednesday, the money had been transferred to Maureen's account. The letter of recommendation arrived via courier. 3 paragraphs of glowing praise that would open doors throughout the tech industry. On paper, everything was resolved. But Clifford couldn't shake the feeling that the other shoe hadn't dropped yet. Thursday afternoon, his instinct proved correct. Darren called. We have a problem. Ricardo Whitehead is asking questions. He's reached out to private security firms, including mine, looking for someone with your specific skill set. Says he's investigating a security breach at his client's residence. Has he connected it to me? Not yet, but he will. Whitehead is dirty, but he's not stupid. He knows the breach was professional, and he knows Hoover fired a woman whose father is former special operations. It's only a matter of time before he puts it together. Clifford had anticipated this. What's Whitehead's next move? Hard to say. If I were him, I'd be looking to restore my reputation. A security breach on his watch makes him look incompetent. He needs a win. That probably means coming after you, either to prove you did it, or to retaliate. Let him come. Clifford's voice was calm. I'm not hard to find. But that evening, when a black SUV parked outside his house and didn't move for 2 hours, Clifford realized the situation was escalating faster than expected. He stepped outside, walked directly to the vehicle, and rapped on the driver's window. The glass rolled down. Ricardo Whitehead sat behind the wheel, a thick-necked man with dead eyes and a cop's swagger that hadn't faded with his termination from the force. Mr. Stevenson. Mind if we talk? I don't have anything to say to you. I think you do. Whitehead smiled without warmth. See, I've been reviewing security footage from the Emerald Tower. Cameras were looped, very professional. But there's always a margin of error. 3 frames showed someone entering the service elevator wearing a beanie and athletic clothes. Built like you. Moving like you. Clifford kept his expression neutral. Interesting theory. Can you prove it? Not yet. But I will. And when I do, Mr. Hoover will press every charge available. You'll spend the next decade in prison. Or, Clifford said slowly, you could accept that you failed to protect your client and move on with your life. Unless you want me to start asking questions about your time with the Seattle PD. I hear Internal Affairs had quite a file on you before you took that severance package. Whitehead's face darkened. You threatening me? I'm suggesting we both have things we prefer stayed buried. You leave me alone. I leave you alone. Seems fair. For a long moment, they stared at each other. 2 men who'd lived in violence, who understood the rules of power. This isn't over, Whitehead finally said. Mr. Hoover wants answers. He pays me very well to get them. He rolled up the window and drove away. Clifford watched the SUV disappear around the corner, then went inside to make a call. Darren, he said when his friend answered. I need deeper surveillance on Dennis Hoover. And I need information on those consultant women who work for Neural Sync. Something's wrong here, and I think we're only seeing the surface. Chapter 5, The Women in the Walls. It took Darren 3 days to gather the information, but what he uncovered turned Clifford's stomach. They met at a diner in Tacoma, away from prying eyes. Darren slid a thick folder across the table. You were right to be suspicious, Darren said. NeuralSync has employed 15 female consultants over the past 4 years, all hired through shell companies, all on short-term contracts. I managed to track down 7 of them. 3 agreed to talk off the record. Clifford opened the folder. Photos, employment records, medical reports. They were recruited the same way, Darren continued. Approached at tech conferences or through LinkedIn, offered lucrative consulting contracts. The work was legitimate at first, programming, interface design, data analysis. But then things would shift. Hoover would start making them work late, alone with him. He'd make advances. If they reported it, he'd threaten their careers. If they resisted, he'd escalate. To what? Depends on the woman. Some he harassed until they quit. Others, Darren's jaw tightened. He drug at least 2 of them. There are photos, videos, which he then used for blackmail. Cooperate, or I release these to your family, your professional network, the world. One woman, Shauna Chavez, attempted suicide after he released the material anyway when she threatened to go public. Clifford felt rage building in his chest, but he forced it down. Rage made you sloppy. He needed to stay sharp. What about Violet Blair, the one in the psychiatric facility? I spoke to her brother, Gerald Calhoun. Darren pulled out a separate file. Violet worked for Neural Sync for 4 months. During that time, she was sexually assaulted repeatedly by Hoover. When she tried to quit, he showed her videos he'd recorded without her knowledge. Explicit material that would destroy her career. She had a complete breakdown. Her brother found her in her apartment after she'd been missing for 2 days. She was catatonic. She's been in treatment for 8 months and still won't speak about what happened. Does her brother know who did this? He suspects, but he has no proof. NeuralSync paid for her psychiatric care, through a shell company, of course. Buying his silence. Clifford closed the folder, his hands shaking with barely controlled fury. What he'd done to Hoover, chaining him to his bed, scaring him, suddenly seemed grotesquely inadequate. This wasn't just harassment. This was systematic predation, possibly trafficking, definitely exploitation that had destroyed lives. Where's Ricardo Whitehead in all this? He asked. Right in the middle. 3 of the women mentioned that Hoover's head of security was present during some incidents. One said Whitehead drugged her drink at a company function. Another said he helped Hoover cover up evidence when she tried to contact police. He's not just an enabler, he's an active participant. The scope of it was staggering. Clifford had dealt with evil before. Terrorists, warlords, men who killed without conscience. But there was something particularly twisted about predators who hid behind corporate structures, who weaponized their wealth and position against vulnerable women. "Can any of them testify?" he asked. "They're terrified. Hoover has lawyers, money, and blackmail material. Even if they came forward, it would be their word against a billionaire. The legal system isn't built to handle this." No, Clifford thought, but I am. That night, he sat down with Maureen and showed her everything, redacting the most graphic details but showing her the pattern, the scope, the systematic nature of Hoover's crimes. She was silent for a long time after he finished. When she finally spoke, her voice was hollow. There were rumors. Women who'd left the company would sometimes reach out on LinkedIn, warning new female employees. But HR always dismissed it as disgruntled ex-workers. I thought I was just unlucky. That I'd made a mistake by being alone with him." "This wasn't your fault," Clifford said firmly. "None of it. Hoover is a predator. He's practiced, sophisticated. You couldn't have known. But now we do know." Maureen looked up at him, and he saw steel in her eyes. His daughter, finding her strength again. "So what are we going to do about it?" "I'm going to stop him," Clifford said simply. "How?" "You already scared him, made him pay me. But clearly that wasn't enough. He's still out there, still hurting people. Then I need to do more than scare him." Clifford stood, walked to the window. Outside, Seattle gleamed in the darkness, beautiful and indifferent. "I need to dismantle everything he's built. His company, his reputation, his freedom. And I need to do it in a way that protects the victims and ensures he can never do this again." "That sounds like a war." "It is. And I've fought wars before." He turned back to his daughter. "But I need your help. You know the company, the technology, the people. I know tactics and strategy. Together, we can bring him down." Maureen hesitated, then nodded. "Tell me what you need me to do." Over the next week, they built their campaign. Clifford used his military intelligence training to map out Hoover's power structure, his board members, his investors, his political connections. He identified vulnerabilities, pressure points, ways to isolate and expose the CEO. Maureen used her tech skills to access information. She kept her laptop from Neural Sync, and it still had VPN access to company servers. She cloned data, financial records, email communications, internal Slack messages, everything that could document the culture of abuse. Meanwhile, Darren worked on the women. Slowly, carefully, he built trust with the three who'd agreed to talk. He connected them with each other, created a support network. 2 more former consultants came forward. Then another. A pattern of testimony was emerging. But they hit a wall when it came to physical evidence. Hoover was careful. The videos and photos he'd used for blackmail were stored on encrypted devices that he controlled. Without that evidence, the women's testimony would be he said, she said. That's when Clifford decided he needed to go back. "You can't be serious," Darren said when Clifford laid out his plan. "You already got lucky once. Whitehead is watching you now. Building security has been upgraded. You try the same trick twice, you'll get caught. I'm not using the same trick." Clifford spread out building schematics on the table. "I'm going to walk through the front door." The plan was audacious. Friday evening, NeuralSync was hosting a gala fundraiser for one of the charities Hoover sat on the board of. 200 guests, catered event, open bar. Security would be focused on managing the crowd, checking names against the guest list, preventing party crashers. Clifford wouldn't be crashing. He'd be invited. Tom Winter, the lawyer, had connections in Seattle's social circuit. Through a friend of a friend, he secured 2 tickets to the gala, listed under false names with legitimate-looking credentials. Clifford would attend as Cameron Howard, a defense contractor interested in NeuralSync's technology. Darren would be his +1. "This is insane," Darren said, but he was smiling. "I'm in." The night of the gala, Clifford dressed in a tailored suit that made him look like exactly what he was pretending to be, a successful businessman with military bearing. His gray hair was slicked back, his face clean-shaven. He looked nothing like the tactical operative who'd breached Hoover's penthouse. The event was at a downtown Seattle venue, all glass and steel and minimalist design. Clifford and Darren passed through security without incident, their false identities holding up to cursory scrutiny. Inside, the The party was a display of wealth and hypocrisy. Tech executives mingled with politicians, venture capitalists with socialites. Waiters circulated with champagne and hors d'oeuvres. On a stage at the far end, a banner proclaimed, Neuralink, building tomorrow's technology today. Target at 3 o'clock, Darren murmured. Dennis Hoover stood near the bar, surrounded by admirers. He wore a tuxedo and his public face. Charming, charismatic, the visionary CEO. He was laughing at something a city councilwoman had said, his hand resting possessively on her lower back. Clifford watched him for a moment, feeling the rage simmer. Then he moved. The plan wasn't to confront Hoover at the gala. It was to get access to his office. Neuralink headquarters occupied 3 floors of the building. During the event, most of the offices would be empty, security focused on the party below. Clifford had studied the layout. Hoover's office was on the top floor, executive suite with private elevator access. He and Darren took the stairs, moving casually, like guests who'd stepped away from a noise. They reached the executive floor without incident. The hallway was deserted, plushly carpeted, lined with abstract art. Hoover's office door had a biometric lock, but Darren had come prepared. He pulled out a device about the size of a phone. A fingerprint duplicator loaded with Hoover's prints, lifted from a champagne glass at the party below. The lock clicked open. Inside, the office was a monument to ego, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, expensive furniture, walls covered with awards and magazine covers featuring Hoover's face. Clifford went straight to the desk. The computer was password-protected, but Maureen had given him a backdoor, a vulnerability in Neuralink's security protocols that she discovered months ago and never reported. He plugged in a USB drive and ran the exploit. The computer unlocked. 5 minutes, Darren said, watching the hallway. That's all we have before someone notices we're gone. Clifford worked fast. He cloned the hard drive's contents, emails, files, everything. He also installed a remote access Trojan that would give Maureen backdoor access to Hoover's system going forward. But that wasn't the prize. In a locked desk drawer, easily picked, he found what he was looking for. A tablet. Encrypted, but Maureen had briefed him on how to bypass Neuralink security. He cracked it in 90 seconds. The contents made him want to put his fist through the wall. Videos. Photos. Dozens of them, organized by woman's name. Violet Blair. Shauna Chavez. Others Clifford recognized from Darren's investigation. And some he didn't. Women whose names he didn't know, but whose terror was visible in every frame. This was Hoover's insurance policy. His leverage. His collection. Clifford copied everything to his USB drive, then deleted the originals. He didn't know if Hoover had backups, but eliminating this source was a start. Time, Darren hissed. They exited the office, leaving everything exactly as they'd found it, and made their way back to the gala. 2 minutes after they returned to the party, Ricardo Whitehead appeared, scanning the crowd with suspicious eyes. But he saw only 2 defense contractors enjoying champagne, discussing military technology contracts. Nothing suspicious, nothing to investigate. Clifford caught Darren's eye and nodded toward the exit. They'd gotten what they came for. As they left, Clifford passed close enough to Dennis Hoover to hear him laughing at another joke, basking in the adoration of people who didn't know what he really was. That laughter wouldn't last much longer. Chapter 6. The Trap Springs. The data Clifford extracted from Hoover's computer was devastating. Maureen spent 2 days reviewing everything, cross-referencing email communications with financial records, building a timeline of abuse that spanned years. This isn't just harassment, she said, looking up from her laptop with horrified eyes. It's organized, systematic. He was selecting women based on specific vulnerabilities, financial need, immigration status, family problems, then exploiting those weaknesses. And Ricardo Whitehead was facilitating everything, arranging private meetings, providing drugs, intimidating victims who tried to report it. Can we go to the police now? Clifford asked. Maybe, but Hoover will claim the data was obtained illegally, which it was. A good lawyer could get it thrown out. We need something cleaner, something that leads law enforcement to discover this themselves. That's when Maureen had her idea. What if we don't go to the police? What if we go to the victims and help them go to the police? Give them the evidence they need to file legitimate complaints with clean chain of custody. Clifford considered this. Hoover still has resources, lawyers who'll attack their credibility. Not if multiple women come forward simultaneously with corroborating evidence and testimony. That's not coincidence. That's a pattern. Even the best lawyers can't make that disappear. It was a good strategy, but it required convincing traumatized women to relive their worst experiences. Clifford wasn't sure he had the right to ask that of them. But Darren made the introductions, and to Clifford's surprise, the women were willing to listen. Not to him. He was too much a reminder of masculine violence, but to Maureen. His daughter met with 5 of them over coffee in quiet corners of the city and shared her own story. The assault in the parking garage, the fear, the shame, but also the anger and the decision to fight back. I'm not asking you to do anything you're not comfortable with, Maureen told them. But if you want justice, if you want to make sure he never does this to anyone else, I can help. We have evidence. We have resources. And we have each other. 3 women agreed to come forward. Then 4. Then 6. Darren used his connections to find them a lawyer. Not someone from Seattle's corporate establishment, but a former prosecutor named Annette Bean who'd made her reputation taking down powerful men. She reviewed the evidence Maureen provided and saw what they all saw, a prosecutable case. This is enough for the police to get a warrant, Annette said at a meeting in her office. Once they're investigating officially, more evidence will emerge. His company emails, his financials, everything will be subpoenaed. This man is going down. But before they could move forward, Ricardo Whitehead made his move. Thursday evening, Clifford was in his garage working on the charger when his security system alerted him to movement in the backyard. He set down his tools and pulled a Sig Sauer P226 from a locked drawer, one of several weapons he'd kept from his military service. 3 men came through the back door with practiced efficiency. Not Whitehead himself, but his security team, the same men Clifford had neutralized at Hoover's penthouse. They were here for payback. The first man never saw Clifford coming. A short, brutal strike to the throat dropped him gasping. The second hesitated, which was his mistake. Clifford disarmed him and used his own weapon to control him. The third man was smarter. He'd hung back, and now he had his gun trained on Clifford. "Don't move," the man said. "Mr. Whitehead wants to talk to you. You're coming with us." "I don't think so." Clifford kept his own weapon trained on the second man. "Mexican standoff. We could do this easy or hard," the third man said. "Either way, you're coming." That's when Maureen appeared in the doorway behind him, holding a shotgun Clifford had taught her to use years ago. "Or you can leave," she said calmly. "Right now, before I call the police and report an armed home invasion." The 3 men froze, reassessing. They'd expected to handle one retired soldier, not a soldier and his armed daughter in a defensible position. "Mr. Hoover isn't going to let this go," the third man finally said, lowering his weapon. "You embarrassed him, humiliated him. He wants answers, and he wants you punished. You can't hide from him." "I'm not hiding," Clifford replied. "But tell Ricardo and his boss this. I have evidence of everything Dennis Hoover has done. Every crime, every victim, everything. If anything happens to me or my daughter, that evidence goes public immediately. To the press, to the police, to his investors, to everyone. His life ends. Tell him that." The men retreated, dragging their gasping colleague with them. After they left, Clifford put his arm around Maureen. She was shaking now, adrenaline wearing off. "That was incredibly brave," he said, "and incredibly stupid. You could have been shot. So could you. Dad, this is getting dangerous. Maybe we should just go to the police now." "We will. Tomorrow. But tonight, we need to assume Hoover knows we're coming for him, which means he'll be making his own moves." Clifford was right. At midnight, his phone rang. Felix O'Connor, the lawyer. "Mr. Stevenson, I'm calling to inform you that my client intends to file a restraining order against you tomorrow morning. He alleges that you've been stalking him, threatening him, and generally harassing him since your daughter's termination. He has security footage and witness testimony to support these claims." Interesting fiction. Additionally, if you or your daughter make any defamatory statements about Mr. Hoover or Neural Sync, we will pursue legal action for slander and libel. The settlement you accepted included a non-disparagement clause, which Hoover violated by sending armed men to my house tonight. Clifford interrupted. That's assault, counselor. Maybe you should advise your client to be more careful. Silence on the line. Then, I don't know what you're talking about. Of course you don't. But you should tell Dennis something. Tell him the game has changed. Tomorrow morning, 6 women are filing police complaints against him. They have evidence. They have testimony. And they have a lawyer who specializes in prosecuting powerful predators. Tell him it's over. He hung up. Maureen looked at him. You just warned him. Now he'll try to destroy evidence, intimidate witnesses. Let him try. We have copies of everything. And every move he makes now just makes him look more guilty. Clifford smiled grimly. I learned a long time ago. Sometimes the best way to win a battle is to let your enemy think they're winning, right up until the moment you spring the trap. What trap? Tomorrow you'll see. Chapter 7. Scorched Earth. Friday morning began with the women filing their police complaints. Annette Bean accompanied all 6 to Seattle PD's Special Victims Unit, where Detective Josephine Barrett, a veteran investigator known for handling sensitive cases, took their statements. The evidence was overwhelming. Testimony from multiple victims, corroborated by text messages, emails, and financial records showing suspicious payments through shell companies. Detective Barrett's face grew darker with each statement she heard. This is enough for a warrant, she told Annette. We'll be visiting NeuralSync headquarters this afternoon. But Dennis Hoover wasn't waiting for the police. He was already executing his own scorched earth strategy. At 10 a.m., a press release went out from NeuralSync's communications team. It announced that CEO Dennis Hoover was taking a temporary leave of absence due to unsubstantiated allegations from disgruntled former employees. The company's board expressed full confidence in Hoover's integrity and condemned malicious efforts to damage the reputation of one of Seattle's most successful entrepreneurs. Simultaneously, Hoover's legal team filed lawsuits against all 6 women for breach of contract and defamation. The suits demanded millions in damages and included detailed and fabricated accounts of the women's supposed misconduct at NeuralSync. The message was clear. If you come after me, I'll destroy you. By noon, the story had hit tech media. Most coverage was sympathetic to Hoover, the embattled CEO facing coordinated attacks. Only a few outlets questioned the timing and similarity of the allegations. Clifford watched it all unfold from his home office, Fury Building. The system was working exactly as designed to protect wealthy predators. Even with 6 credible accusers, even with evidence, Hoover was spinning the narrative. Then Ricardo Whitehead made his move. At 2 p.m., Whitehead called Clifford directly. Mr. Stevenson, we need to meet. Face to face. Just you and me. Why would I do that? Because Mr. Hoover has made me aware of certain security footage from his office. The night of the gala. Footage that shows you and another man breaking into his private office and stealing data from his computer. That's corporate espionage, breaking and entering, theft. Federal crimes. Unless you back off right now, he's turning that footage over to the FBI. Clifford had anticipated this. Do it. Turn over the footage. Explain to the FBI why Dennis Hoover had videos of women being sexually assaulted stored on his office computer. Explain the blackmail material, the systematic predation. See how that plays out. You're bluffing. You don't have copies of anything. We checked. The files were deleted. Wrong. I have everything. And if anything happens to me, it all goes public. So here's my counteroffer, Ricardo. You testify against Hoover. You tell the police everything you did, everything he ordered you to do. In exchange, maybe you get immunity. Maybe you only spend a few years in prison instead of decades. You're insane if you think I'm turning on my client. Am I? Because from where I'm sitting, you're an accomplice to multiple felonies. You drugged women. You facilitated assaults. You intimidated witnesses. When this all comes out, and it will, you're going down with him. Unless you cooperate. There was a long pause. Then Whitehead hung up. But Clifford had heard something in that pause. Doubt. Fear. The beginning of self-preservation overriding loyalty. That afternoon, Detective Barrett and 2 other officers arrived at NeuralSync with a search warrant. They seized computers, files, and Hoover's personal devices. Employees watched in shock as detectives carried boxes of evidence out of the executive suite. Dennis Hoover wasn't there. He'd fled to his penthouse, surrounding himself with lawyers and security. By evening, the media narrative was shifting. The Seattle Times ran a story. 6 women allege systematic abuse by tech CEO. The reporter had spoken to Annette Bean and reviewed some of the evidence. The piece was careful, legally vetted, but damning in its details. Other outlets followed. By nightfall, #NeuralSync was trending on social media. Employees were posting anonymously about the toxic culture. Former workers were coming forward with their own stories. The protective wall around Dennis Hoover was cracking. At 9 p.m., Tom Winter called Clifford. "You need to see this." Hoover's board just released a statement. They're placing him on immediate administrative leave and launching an independent investigation. His investors are nervous. This is bigger than legal trouble. His company is at risk of collapse. "Good," Clifford said, "but it's not enough. He needs to face criminal charges. Barrett's building a case, but these things take time. Months, maybe years. Can you wait that long?" Clifford thought about Violet Blair, catatonic in a psychiatric facility. About Shauna Chavez's suicide attempt. About Maureen's torn blazer and trembling hands. "No," he said. "I can't." That night, Clifford made a decision. He'd been a soldier, bound by rules of engagement and military law. But he wasn't a soldier anymore. He was a father whose daughter had been hurt, and he was operating under older rules. Primal rules. He called Darren. "I need one more favor. The biggest one yet. Name it. I need you to get Ricardo Whitehead to flip. Whatever it takes. Threaten him, bribe him, convince him, I don't care. But I need him to testify against Hoover. Everything. On the record." That's ambitious. Whitehead is looking at serious time if he cooperates. He might decide his best bet is to stay quiet and hope for the best. Then change his calculus. Make him understand that staying quiet guarantees he goes down with Hoover. But cooperating gives him a chance. Darren was quiet for a moment. Then, "You're asking me to do something that's probably illegal. I'm asking you to help me get justice for women who've been hurt. For my daughter. Will you help me?" Another pause. Then, "Yeah, I will. But Cliff, after this, we're even. No more favors. No more missions. I'm getting too old for this shit." Deal. Chapter 8. The Breaking Point. Saturday morning, Darren tracked Ricardo Whitehead to a strip mall bar in South Seattle, where he was drinking away his problems at 11 a.m. Darren slid into the booth across from him. "We need to talk," Darren said. Whitehead looked up with bloodshot eyes. "Who the fuck are you? Someone who can help you. Or hurt you. Your choice." Darren slid a folder across the table. "That's documentation of everything you've done for Dennis Hoover. Drug purchases from your old contacts in narcotics. Witness intimidation. Obstruction of justice. You're looking at 20 years minimum." Whitehead's face paled as he flipped through the folder. "Where did you get this?" "Doesn't matter. What matters is I'm giving you one chance. Testify against Hoover. Tell the police everything. In exchange, the prosecutor might offer immunity or a reduced sentence. You could walk away from this. Hoover will destroy me if I flip." "Hoover is finished," Darren said flatly. "His company is imploding. His investors are abandoning him, and the police have enough evidence to prosecute him. The only question is whether you go down with him. Make the smart choice, Ricardo. Save yourself." Whitehead stared at the documents, then at Darren. "I need to think about it. You have until Monday morning. After that, this folder goes to the prosecutor, and you lose any chance at a deal." Darren stood and walked away, leaving Whitehead alone with his conscience and his fear. Meanwhile, Clifford received an unexpected visitor. Tom Winter called at noon, his voice urgent. "You need to get down to my office. Now, someone's here who wants to talk to you." 30 minutes later, Clifford walked into the lawyer's conference room and found himself face-to-face with Gerald Calhoun, Violet Blair's brother. Gerald was in his early 30s, tall and thin, with the exhausted look of someone who'd been fighting too long. He stood when Clifford entered. "Mr. Stevenson, thank you for meeting me. Tom said you're the one who's been investigating Dennis Hoover." "I am. Your sister. How is she?" Gerald's expression tightened. "She's still at the facility. Hasn't spoken in 8 months. The doctors say she might never fully recover from the trauma. His hands balled into fists. I want to help. Whatever you're doing to take down Hoover, I want to be part of it. It's dangerous, Clifford said. Hoover is fighting back. He has lawyers, money. I don't care. He destroyed my sister's life. Someone needs to make him pay. Gerald pulled out his own folder. I've been investigating him too. For months. I have evidence of other victims, other crimes. Things even you might not know about. Clifford took the folder. Inside were financial records showing payments to offshore accounts, private investigator reports documenting Hoover's activities, even photographs of Hoover meeting with known criminals. Where did you get this? I used to work in forensic accounting before Violet got sick. I cashed out my retirement, hired investigators, spent every free moment digging into Hoover's life. I was planning to go to the police eventually, but they never take these cases seriously. Then I heard about the 6 women filing complaints, and Tom reached out to me. I want to add my evidence to theirs. Clifford studied the younger man. He saw rage there, barely controlled. He recognized it. It was the same rage he felt every time he thought about Maureen's assault. All right, Clifford said. We'll work together. But we do this smart. No revenge fantasies, no vigilante bullshit. We build a case that puts Hoover behind bars for the rest of his life. Agreed? Gerald nodded. Agreed. But I want to be there when they arrest him. I want him to know Violet's brother helped bring him down. That evening, they met at Clifford's house. Him, Maureen, Darren, Gerald, Annette Bean, and Detective Barrett. The detective shouldn't have been there officially, but Annette had convinced her that coordinating with the victims' families would strengthen the case. They laid out everything they had. The testimony of 6 women. The evidence from Hoover's computer. Gerald's financial records showing money laundering and payments to criminal associates. Darren's documentation of Ricardo Whitehead's crimes. This is overwhelming, Barrett said, reviewing it all. We can arrest Hoover tomorrow. Multiple charges, sexual assault, blackmail, witness intimidation, maybe even trafficking if we can prove he was selling the videos. What about Whitehead? Clifford asked. We'll offer him a deal if he cooperates. But we don't need him. The case is strong enough without his testimony. Clifford exchanged glances with Darren. They both knew Whitehead's testimony would seal the case, but Barrett was right. They could proceed without it. When do we move? Maureen asked. Monday morning. We'll arrest Hoover at his penthouse, execute search warrants on his properties and Neuralink headquarters. This will be big. Media will be everywhere. Barrett looked at Maureen and the other victims. Are you ready for that? For your names to be public? We're ready, Maureen said, and the other women nodded. But Sunday night, everything changed. At 11 p.m., Clifford's phone rang. Darren, his voice urgent. Turn on the news. Channel 5. Clifford grabbed the remote. The breaking news banner read, Tech CEO Dennis Hoover found dead. The reporter was standing outside the Emerald Tower. Discovered by a security team approximately 1 hour ago. Police are calling it an apparent suicide. Hoover allegedly jumped from his 38th floor penthouse balcony. Authorities say he left a note admitting to various crimes and apologizing to his victims. We'll have more information as. Clifford muted the TV, his mind racing. Suicide? Or something else? His phone rang again. Detective Barrett. Mr. Stevenson, I need to ask you where you were tonight. Home. All evening. My daughter can confirm. Good. Because right now, this looks like suicide, but I need to rule out foul play. Can you think of anyone who might have wanted Hoover dead? Clifford thought about Ricardo Whitehead, facing 20 years in prison. About Gerald Calhoun, whose sister's life had been destroyed. About dozens of possible suspects with legitimate grievances. Half of Seattle had motive, he said carefully. But detective, if this really was suicide, maybe it's because Hoover knew he was caught. Knew there was no way out. Maybe, Barrett said, not sounding convinced. I'll be in touch. After she hung up, Maureen came downstairs. Dad, did you? No, he said firmly. I didn't. I wanted him to face justice, to stand trial, to be held accountable. I didn't want this. But even as he said it, he couldn't help feeling a dark satisfaction. Dennis Hoover was dead. One way or another, he'd face consequences for his crimes. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. The problem is solved. No need to thank me. Consider us even. R.W. Clifford stared at the message, then deleted it. Ricardo Whitehead had made his choice: eliminate the threat rather than testify against it. Whether he'd pushed Hoover or simply convinced him to jump, the result was the same. The predator was dead. Chapter 9. Aftermath. Dennis Hoover's death didn't end the story. It accelerated it. The suicide note, recovered by police, was a partial confession. Hoover admitted to inappropriate relationships with employees and to errors in judgment regarding workplace conduct. He apologized to anyone who felt harmed by his actions. It was carefully worded, probably drafted with legal counsel before his death, designed to minimize liability for his estate. But the investigation didn't stop. Detective Barrett and her team executed the search warrants anyway, seizing evidence from Neural Sync and Hoover's properties. The media coverage exploded. More women came forward with their stories. The pattern of abuse was undeniable. A week after Hoover's death, the Seattle Times published a comprehensive expose, The Man Behind the Technology, Dennis Hoover's Secret Life. It detailed everything: the systematic harassment, the blackmail that destroyed lives. Annette Bean had worked with journalists to tell the victims' stories while protecting their identities where requested. Maureen was quoted in the article, using her real name. Dennis Hoover assaulted me and tried to silence me with threats and NDAs. I'm speaking out now so other women know they're not alone, and so that powerful men understand they can't hide behind their wealth and position. The response was overwhelming. Thousands of messages of support. Other women sharing their own stories of workplace abuse. A movement crystallizing around the idea that tech's culture of impunity needed to change. Neural Sync's board dissolved the company. Assets were sold off, with proceeds going to a victim compensation fund established by Annette Bean. The technology Hoover had claimed to be building, the neural interface AI, turned out to be largely vaporware anyway, years away from viability. Ricardo Whitehead disappeared. Dare heard through contacts that he'd left Seattle, possibly left the country. Without Hoover paying his salary, without a job or prospects, he'd vanished into whatever holes men like him crawled into. The police never officially concluded whether Hoover's death was suicide or murder. The note suggested suicide, but forensics couldn't rule out that he'd been pushed. The case remained technically open, but without witnesses or evidence, it eventually went cold. Clifford didn't care about the details. What mattered was that Hoover was gone and couldn't hurt anyone else. 3 months later, on a Saturday afternoon in late March, Clifford stood in his garage, putting finishing touches on the Charger. The engine purred perfectly, chrome gleaming, a project finally completed after 3 years of work. Maureen came out, carrying 2 beers. She'd moved back in her own apartment, but visited regularly. She'd started interviewing with tech companies. The letter of recommendation Hoover had provided, ironically, was helping her land interviews at top firms. Her trauma was still present, still something she worked through with a therapist, but she was healing. "It looks beautiful, Dad," she said, handing him a beer. "Thanks. Thinking about taking it out tomorrow. Want to come with?" "I'd love that." She leaned against the workbench. "I heard from Tricia Torres today. She's organizing a conference about workplace safety in tech. She wants me to speak. Are you going to?" "I think so. It's scary, but I don't want to hide anymore. Hoover took enough from me. He doesn't get to take my voice, too." Clifford felt pride swell in his chest. His daughter, brilliant, resilient, strong in ways that had nothing to do with physical prowess. "I'm proud of you, Pumpkin." "I'm proud of us," she corrected. "We did this together. You, me, Darren, Gerald, all the women who came forward. We stopped a predator." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, sipping their beers, listening to the suburban sounds of a Saturday afternoon. Kids playing basketball down the street, a lawn mower, birds singing. Normal. Safe. Home. "Dad," Maureen finally said, "can I ask you something?" "Always." "That night, you went to Hoover's penthouse the first time. When you chained him to his bed. Were you going to kill him?" Clifford considered the question carefully. "No. I wanted to scare him, to show him he wasn't untouchable. But I wasn't there to kill him. That's not who I am." "But if you had known then what we found out later? About all the other women, the videos, everything, He met her eyes. I don't know. Maybe. I'd like to think I'd still choose the legal route, building a case, getting justice through the system. But honestly, if I'd known the full extent of what he'd done. He paused. There's a part of me that will always be a soldier, that knows sometimes the mission requires hard choices. Do you think Whitehead killed him? I think Whitehead saw a problem and solved it in the most efficient way available to him. Whether that means pushing Hoover off the balcony or convincing him to jump, I don't know. And I've decided I don't need to know. Maureen nodded slowly. Part of me feels guilty for not being more upset about Hoover's death. Is that wrong? No, Clifford said gently. You're allowed to feel relief that someone who hurt you is gone. That doesn't make you a bad person. It makes you human. They finished their beers as the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Later that evening, after Maureen had left, Clifford sat in his home office and reviewed the file one last time. Everything they gathered, everything they discovered. Then he created an encrypted backup, stored it in 3 separate secure locations, and deleted the local copies. Just in case. Just an insurance. Because he'd learned in 30 years of military service that missions didn't really end. They just paused, and you needed to be ready when they resumed. His phone buzzed. A text from Gerald Calhoun. Violet spoke today. First words in 9 months. She said, thank you. I told her about everything you did. About how Hoover can't hurt anyone anymore. I think she's going to be okay. Thank you, Clifford, for everything. Clifford read the message twice, then set down his phone. In the framed photo on his desk, he and Maureen smiled at the camera on her Stanford graduation day, full of hope and possibilities. That's what this had all been about. Not revenge, though that had played part. Not justice, though they pursued it. But protection. The oldest, most fundamental mission, keeping his daughter safe. Making sure she could live without fear. Outside, Seattle glittered in the darkness, a city full of dreams and dangers, triumphs and tragedies. Somewhere out there, other predators prowled, other victims suffered. The world was full of Dennis Hoovers, men who believed power made them untouchable. But it was also full of Maureens, women who found their voices and refused to be silenced. And Cliffords, fathers who would move heaven and earth to protect their children. The battle was never truly over. But this battle at least was won. Clifford turned off the lights and locked up the garage, the Charger gleaming in the darkness like a promise kept. Tomorrow, he and Maureen would take it for a drive. They'd feel the wind and the speed and the freedom of an open road. But tonight they could rest. The mission was complete. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your precious time. If you enjoyed this story, then please make sure you subscribe to this channel. That would help me a lot. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.